Everything starts with the one represented by the circle, the sphere, and the breaking into human consciousness, into language, occurs when we split the one into two, into duality. The split can be made any number of different ways, and ultimately the split is an illusion, meaning you cannot divide the earth in half with a saw and say this is this half of the earth and this is the other half of the earth. The entire ecology that is, quote, earth dissolves as soon as you make the cut, right? And it's ultimately all part of everything, right? Which is the indivisible one. But to have consciousness, because there's no awareness with one. How are you feeling? Everything. How are you feeling? Nothing. There's no consciousness, right? The way we interact with reality, our consciousness comes from the slivers that we divide reality into in our mind. And then the ways that we reconstruct those slivers to form patterns that we choose to believe, that we choose to make sense of, that we choose to build with. Now, the division that I want to work with today is, it has a couple of points. So on one side of the line, we'll have tradition and evolution, change. We'll have the parent. We'll have the child. We'll have the emerging leadership and the oppressive power structure. We'll have the flow and the resistance, right? Now, I want to start mythologically as we look at these different things because, in a somewhat patriarchal cult and culture, and let's face it, when the top deity in every major religion, in every major theology, whether it's Buddhism, Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, when the top figure in this illusionary dynamic where there's one source of power, there's one point out of which everything emerges. Now, anyone who's given birth to a child knows it's actually quite different, right? You have the feminine and masculine principle coming together to give birth to something new. It is the synergy that is really the source of all that is. It's illusion. It's not scientific to pretend one gender is more important, or one principle, the principle of openness, the principle of closedness. It's an illusion to pretend that the speaker is more important than the listener, or the listener is more important than the speaker. To have flow, to have synergy, to have a dynamic, you need two poles. But in a cult or culture that's emphasizing one, right, you have a skewed dynamic. And in that skewed dynamic, right, if God is a man, if God is the masculine principle, the speaker rather than the listener, the giver rather than the receiver, the initiator rather than the responder. That's the idea, right? That's better, that's number one, right? When God is masculine, the idea is that one part of this balance is better than another. But life actually emerges in cooperative synergy. Now, in a somewhat chauvinistic, etc., the mythologies are, for example, about the king, right? So we have the hero's journey. We haven't really figured out the heroine's journey, which in the feminine principle might be different, right? The male, to become an adult, needs to leave the circle, needs to leave the womb, needs to risk death to be born, right? First, as an infant, right? It's very comfortable in that womb. But you don't grow up until you push through the walls of death, through the narrows, out into a probability field in which a certain percentage of infants die, a certain percentage of infants are traumatized, a certain number of infants are put up for adoption, are not wanted, or bullied. Right? You leave the circle, you leave the comfortable domain of the family, the familiar. And there's no guarantee that you'll come back alive. And so the hero's journey, the journey of usually the helpless infant becoming the king, that's the essence of the journey. And everyone is born a helpless infant. Everyone is born a victim. Everyone is born completely dependent on the competent and incompetent people around them. And they're both, right? Everyone is incompetent in a whole spectrum of areas. And everyone has some degree of competence in a whole spectrum of areas. And so the infant is a victim, poor, dependent, uncertain, and helpless. We're all born a peasant. And the first question is, can we survive peasanthood? Can we survive victimhood? Can we survive as a helpless infant and become a child? And can we copy the status quo, the protocol, enough that people want us around? Right? Because as a child, if nobody wants us around, they can kill us. They can decide not to feed us, not to give us what we want. And so there's a tension, there's a contract that goes on. You're going to learn my language. You're going to eat this food. You're going to live in this structure, this environment. You're going to do this. You're going to say this. There's a contract that goes on. And if you do enough of that, we won't put you in an institution. If you learn to think, we'll keep you around. And if you don't, well, you die, you become an outcast in some form, right? And carry the shame, as all infants internalize the message of their environment. If you are not treated well as an infant, it's because you were not good enough. Every child knows this. What the child doesn't know is you've got schizophrenic, sociopathic parents. You've got addicts for caregivers. You've got people trying to look good in a cult that values the expense of one's car, or whether it's electric, right? You don't have a cult that's valuing your presence, your competency as a parent in the same way. It depends on the microcult, but this journey, then, this is the unconditional domain of the child. Again, right? It's again a surrender. It's again an unconditional download of you learn, you eat, you speak what's given to you. And then this moves into adolescence. And again, right? If you rebel, they will not want you. If you criticize the status quo, they don't need to feed you. There's a tension as you move into adolescence, and not everyone chooses to be born. Some people like to stay in the domain of the perfect parent as children. Mom and dad did the best they could. Mom and dad, they're wonderful. They don't make mistakes. What would you like, Mom and Dad? Oh, you'd like me to become an attorney. You'd like me to get an A and B. What would you like now, right? I'll live for you, Mom and Dad. I don't want to grow up. I don't want to become an adolescent, right? And those that do, the rebel, like I rebel against this, I rebel against that, right? That's fucked up. That's fucked up. That's a lie. You just said don't lie, but you just lied there. You said don't commit adultery. It's in the 10 Commandments. What's that lipstick? Why is there a condom in your pocket, Dad, if you're just having sex with Mom? What the fuck's going on, right? So it's wonderful to be an adolescent, right? If you get into it. That's fucked up. That's corrupt. That's rotten. That's hypocritical. So-and-so stole that. So-and-so's having an affair with that. Right? It's all fucked up. Wonderful. You're fucked up. You're fucked up. The government's fucked up. The past is fucked up. The future is probably fucked up. Right? Here I am, an adolescent, criticizing, critiquing everything. Right? It's wonderful. Zero responsibility. You're fucked up, you're fucked up, you're fucked up. But to become an adult, you actually have to do something about it. Which means, first of all, you got to look at why it's fucked up. How did it get fucked up? Why did it get fucked up? That's not too hard for the adolescent, but we've got a whole nother transition going on as we go into adulthood. Because an adult is not the one that blames. The adult is someone that uses the data provided from their own internal adolescent or the adolescents in the culture and responds. And the adult doesn't just respond with blame or throw it back or defense. That's adolescent. An adult responds with love. Not with the love of the child, I need you, I need this. Not with the love of the adolescent, I want this, I lust for this, I have to have this. An adult responds with competency, with discipline, and with love. You're not competent, you're not disciplined, you don't have love, you're not an adult. You could be 80 years old and a fucking child. An adult responds with love, with a vision of a more beautiful world. An adult sees something beautiful, something good, something true that has not been born yet. An adult gives birth to something out of that criticism, out of the illumination of the imperfection of everything, and create something more beautiful, more true, more good than it was, original. An adult is life's expression of evolution. Sympathy, child, antipathy, adolescent, synthesis, synergy, evolution, love is the essence of an adult. You are dealing with an adult when someone responds to pain, to incompetence, to cruelty, to stupidity, with discipline, with competency, and with love. You see, but critics hate being focused on, right? The whole focus of an adolescent is to get the attention out there. They're so dumb, they're so hypocritical. Oh, that was such a dumb mistake they made, right? And it's easy, right? The adolescent's living at home, doesn't have a job, sees the stupidity of their teachers every day, right? Watches their parents' incompetent marriage. It's easy, right? Get my free foods, watch my free TV, see how dumb the world is, right? But the adolescent does not want to be on the line. Okay, adolescent, right? You go out there. We all know that money is dumb, so you devise a new medium of exchange. I don't want to do that. We'll go to the neighbors, right? See if they'll take your wood chips as a currency. See if they'll listen to your criticism, right? Adolescent is terrified. The adolescent is not an adult and cannot be an adult. An adolescent cannot love, right? That's an adult, right? And that's an initiation. That's something being born. That's a willingness and an ability to respond, to make things better than they were, than they are. That's an adult. Now, in this tension between the old and the young, right, there's a lot of mythology, right? Often the king begins as a peasant. In The Lord of the Rings, Aragorn is not sure he wants to be a king. He's not sure he's worthy to be a king. He's a ranger out in the forest, right? And Iron John, the cinder biter, the ashes, Iron Hans, right? The warrior begins as a child. Not sure I want the responsibility. Maybe I will fuck up, right? Any honest adolescent, any honest human being who thinks that they're going to do 10 times better than the last government, that they're going to be a 10 times better parent than their parents, is a fool, right? Now, how long does it take for a person to realize they're a fool, right? An adolescent, probably within 20 years, they're beginning to realize that their parenting isn't all that much better than their parenting, right? That their work at the company, they're not number one. They haven't reestablished the global currency. They're not giving away all their possessions like they said everyone else should, right? 10, 20, 30 years, how long does it take an adolescent to realize that they're not as smart as they pretended? And by that time, there's a new generation of adolescents who are pointing the finger at them. You fucked up idiot, right? Why? Oh, there he goes again. Oh, doing the same mistake over and over and over again, right? And by that point, the adolescent may realize they're right, right? I'm 50 years old, I'm still a fool, or I'm just realizing that I'm a fool. And that's a beginning, right? So we don't initiate our young automatically. We stay children and adolescents for decades in our culture. Goody two-shoes, trying to please the parent, the authority figure, looking the other way at all corruption and cruelty. It's like, no, they would never do that to me. And then they get laid off. And the town dries up. And being goody two-shoes doesn't work anymore. And they're pissed, right? Because they were a perfect child. Right? The adolescent criticizing everything doesn't help, right? At some point, you get tired of coming up with everything that everyone else is doing wrong, but I'm doing nothing I'm not that good at my job. I'm not a great parent. My friends don't speak particularly highly of me. Right? Criticizing other people, maybe all those criticisms are about me. And there's a reason for that, right? Because every child downloads the pattern, every adolescent rebels and criticizes the pattern. But an adolescent can't change. That takes love. That takes an adult. But one of the slices is between the murderous parent and the divine king, right? The divine queen. Now, every infant is born desiring to feel sustainably better, desiring ease, desiring grace, imagining the beautiful world. Every child knows what it wants, right? I want the breast. I want attention. I want someone to play with me, engage with me, protect me. Every adolescent knows what they want and what's wrong with things, right? But it isn't a perfect world, right? The world, the culture is asymmetrical. It's unbalanced, it's wobbly, it's painful. And the parent is in a difficult position. On the one hand, they empathize with their child. When you watch the terror and grief and loneliness of an infant as you put them in a crib and go off to work, leaving them with a stranger that you know does not have the capacity to love your infant the way that infant wants to be loved. They may not have a breast. They may not care. If you look into the eyes of that infant and you see the depth, the pain, the rage, the terror, please don't leave me. And you, with superior mass, right, the infant is helpless, put them down into a cage, that's a crib, and walk out the door and hope the screaming, the despair, doesn't last too many hours. If you're traumatically literate, you might hope your child doesn't get complex PTSD from the terror and shame of abandonment in a fucked up cage in a helpless state. You know that, and you walk out the door. If you can do that with a straight face and think this is a perfect world, this conversation is not for you. Right? You're too dumb to figure out what's going on. That's not a beautiful world, to leave an infant in despair, and we do it every day in this cult. Because duty calls, not the duty of an infant and a parent, the marketplace, right? Something a little bit off, right? This is not a perfect world. This is cruel. Right? And you're divided, right? I could stay with this infant, but I'm not an empathic enough person to enjoy it. And I don't know why that is. I see other mothers sometimes loving their children, caring. I don't know what's gone on in my family history, but I just want to get away. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Right? Now, the truth is, it's not a perfect world. There's a lot of pain, a lot of incompetence, and a lot of cruelty. And a lot of it gets borne by those who are most helpless, most vulnerable, most out of control, the least responsible. Our infants, our children, our poor, our sick, our mentally disabled. A lot of the burden of our imperfection is rested on their bodies as we walk out the door and leave them in an institution, leave them alone. Pour a little alcohol down the throat so that they'll sleep for 5 hours. Go off to a dinner party with an inexperienced babysitter, left in the care of another person without knowing how to take care of themselves. So, if the parent is confronted with too much of this reality, too much of this truth, right? How do they respond? What happens when the child has a tantrum and speaks of this cruelty? What happens when the child can speak? Don't leave me. Why are you leaving me? Why are you abandoning me? There's a balance, right? And one part of the parent's job is to kill off the innocence, to kill off the truth, to kill off the questions, to silence the voice of protest. Because the system, the cult, has not made allowances for that change. Right? So the parent is delivering the knife, delivering the wound of the cult, of an imperfect world, and ramming it down the throat of their child. And then teaching the child, burying the wound, that this is for your own good. Those hot coals, that abandonment, that was for you. Reframing the wound as culture, as progress, as what we do in this world, as the way the world is, as something you have to adjust to. You could say, as a quick analogy, the parent's job is to take a hot hair curling iron and scorch the skin of their 2-year-old child. Give them third-degree burns. Scar them and break bones. And that's part of our culture's version of parenting. And then the other half of parenting is to dress the wounds, is to apologize if the parent isn't too shame-based, if the parent isn't too oblivious, too dissociative, too sociopathic, to apologize, to tend the wounds, to acknowledge the pain, and help the child into adolescence and into adulthood as best they can. Right? But there's a king, there's a queen. There's a divine being that gets burned in that first stage, that learns that they're inadequate, that learns that they're a disappointment, that learns that the most beautiful light that wants to come out of that child has no value, has no currency, is dishonored, is not as important as the football game on that, get that kid out of this living room, he's making too much noise. I want to watch that screen. And that light, that direct light, because one way of looking at this is we refract the one, the truth, the whole, into a series of simplistic models that we can make sense of, because the whole is just way too complicated. And so we divide it into categories, into a model that we can make sense of, and this model creates consciousness. It works. It's a bumpy ride, as anyone driving on square tires will tell you. It's painful, right? The child comes in whole, and they watch these parts of themselves be cut off, butchered by the parent. What the child brings is medicine. Medicine in the form of pain, medicine in the form of grief, medicine in the form of truth and beauty. Because a child will tell you where your system is rotten. The innocence of an infant knows where the model deviates from the truth. And that's the gift of a child. That's the gift of evolution. It's common knowledge among many disciplines, including archaeology and various forms of scientists, that the political focus on killing off anomalous data, right? Every model of reality in every cult, in every discipline, has anomalous data. What's anomalous data? Well, you have the one, you have reality. Damn it. Then you have your model of reality. And you don't see reality. You see your model of reality. You see this, right? So what's the anomalous data? Well, it's the stuff that's real that doesn't fit into your model. You know, and it doesn't matter how good your model of reality is. It's not reality. It's a model of reality. And your brain, my brain, is not sophisticated to grasp reality in high resolution with the level of distinction with which reality exists. You cannot see subatomic particles, let alone calculate their movement in real time. You can't see one fucking finger for a single minute as that finger is on all of its dimensions. With its past, its present, its future interlinked, with all of its atoms and subatomic particles. You could spend 1 trillion years trying to put 1 minute of one finger into language, and that language would be your model for constructing the finger. It wouldn't be the finger. It wouldn't be real. And what that means is that no matter how good your model is, there's going to be anomalous data. There's going to be data that doesn't fit into the model. Your parent is a wonderful parent and you should be grateful. Okay, you're asking me to subscribe to a model, a view, a construct of my parent. But I'm asking you to look at this video and watch the rage of a drunken parent driving over a dog and kicking it. Is this video a good parent? Right? Now there's a moment here, right? You look at the video, your parent is a good parent. Should we all get drunk, drive over our pets, and then kick and curse the pet? Maybe that's the definition of goodness, right? There's anomalous data, and what cowards do, what simplistic thinkers do, what politicians do, what most of the authorities, the authors. What is an author? It's not an author of life, it's an author of a model of life. It's a story. And every story has anomalous data. You see, and the thing about kids is they're small. When you try and show the video that doesn't fit the narrative, well, you just give them a slap. Don't you talk back to me, right? Don't present anomalous data. Don't tell me about the fact that my model is obviously wrong. There isn't a single model of reality that is as good as reality, because if it was, you wouldn't need the model. You wouldn't need the language. Language is a model. It's a symbol. You think the word hand is a hand? No, it's a model for a hand. It's a representative, and it's a crude one at that. Hand, thing with 5 points. Useless to actually understand 1/1,000,000th of a hand, but good enough. It's a model that's good enough, right? So every child sees more of the world than the older generation, because they have not been trapped into the lie. The lie is the box. The lie is the model. The grown-ups would have you believe that the model is real. This is how it is. You do this, and you live happily ever after. You go to school, you get good grades, you get a good job, you make lots of money, somebody wants to marry you, you have children, and you live happily ever after. My wife can't have children. Oh, don't talk about that. It doesn't fit into the model, right? Oh, we have a new model. Right? People who can't have children, you do this and this and this. It's now part of the model. It's been added, right? We're always doing one or two things. We're killing off anomalous data, or we're making the model more complicated, right? So good scientists, good storytellers, good politicians, when you present anomalous data, they revise their model, right? So now it has a point here. That seems to cover most of it. Yeah, but what about this bit over here? That's too much. You're being too picky, right? We got most of it. We're not smart. You think we can just create 1,000,000-point models right and left and get other people to agree to them? People don't like change. So be lucky that, you pointed out you had 5 siblings. We thought you were, okay, fine. We get 2 of them, right? You're now with 2 of your siblings. Now get on with it, right? We can't, it doesn't fit into the model, right? So a child is constantly being told, constantly experiencing the reality that the model, that the cult has prepared for it, doesn't have a home for this feeling. Little girls are not supposed to be angry. They're supposed to be pretty. You've got anger, it doesn't fit the model. Just get rid of it, right? Little boys are not supposed to dress up in lipstick and wear fairy dresses. But I want to wear a fairy dress. I want to have a magic wand. No. That's not the model. Get rid of that. Here, have a Tonka toy. Good, do that. That's what boys do, right? No, but I saw in that Disney movie, shut up, go to your room, and think how ungrateful you are that we got you a Tonka toy, right? So it's, the child has to figure out how to fit into the box by denying, by suppressing, by shaming, by dissociating parts of themselves that the cult or culture is suppressing, denying, shaming for them, right? That's what's going on throughout childhood. Slowly, right? Oh, isn't it cute? You crawled over and vomited over here. Well, you're 1 year old, we'll still allow that. But no. The box gets narrower, right? As you start to be able to think, you have to sit and talk, you have to be able to do this, and you have to say this, you have to say thank you. Well, I don't feel thank you. He laughed at me, and I felt humiliated. I don't feel thank you that he invited me to his house. Shut up. That feeling of humiliation isn't welcome here. That's not what's important. What's important is this family mannered? And what mannered families do is they say thank you to the host for this, and they appreciate that the host invited them over so they could be humiliated in the parking lot. So say thank you. Say thank you. Do I have to beat you? Are you not going to come to the next event? You have to not get any dessert and allowance? What do I have to do with my superior mass to bully you into the little box we've constructed of what this family is and isn't? And if you don't fit, it's your fault. Every infant, every child knows it's all their fault, right? But there's a divine energy. What does divine mean? Well, before there was the model, before there was the cult, when there's only the circle, right? The circle's there. And at any given point in a cycle, right? What's a breath? It's a cycle. You exhale, you inhale. You exhale, you inhale, right? At any point in the cycle, the medicine is back to center. Right? At different points in the cycle, the medicine is going back to center. That's the point of grace. That's the point of ease. That's the garden. We fell out of the garden. We fell into asymmetry. We got lost in polarity. We got lost in language. We got lost in our model. And our model never works perfectly. And the gap between perfection and our model is called pain. It's called suffering. It's called discomfort. It's called confusion. I smiled nicely at their man. They're supposed to smile back. Instead, they sniffed at me and walked away as if I was nothing. That's not what the model said. The model says you be nice to someone and they're nice back. So now you need to either tune that out or you need a new model. Well, some people are mean. That's what people do, but mean people do this other thing, right? Well, why are there mean people? Why are they mean to me? Well, then you expand the model. It's all a narrative. And the model changes with time. Right? We've all heard throughout history, the Earth is flat. The entire solar system travels around the Earth, right? The Earth was created in 6 days. It's all a model, right? And at some point, enough anomalous data presents itself, number one. Number two, and enough disinterested parties present themselves. That's the next generation. That the new data gets incorporated into the model, right? Because the person that said the world gets created in 6 days doesn't like hearing that they were wrong and that nobody should listen to them anymore because they were wrong, right? That person doesn't want to hear that, right? Which is why it is enough anomalous data and disinterested parties, right? People who aren't receiving government funding from that person, right, are now open to new data. Well, now that we're liberated from that constraint, from that fear, from that bullying, from that blackmail, from that blacklist, now that we're liberated from someone in the power structure, now we can embrace new data, right? There's no more agenda to protect a certain person's story. And so the story expands. The story expands. Culture is a history of stories, right? And those stories come and go like the waves, like the breaths, like ripples through time. 10,000 cults, 10,000 cultures and counting, rippling through time, subsiding, dissolving. 95% of all cultures in history are dead. The wave came, crashed on the beach, and is no more. And we're on another wave that has a 95% statistical chance of crashing on the beach of time and disappearing. In 1 trillion years from now, no one will remember anything from our time. It's too irrelevant to the new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being 1 trillion years from now. Too much has changed for this to be relevant 1 trillion years from now. We've only been going 25 billion years, give or take a few billion, right? We're not interested in the slime or the exact chemical reactions. By and large, we're interested in what's going on right now. Now, the child is born with a biology, with a drive to seek grace, to seek goodness, to seek beauty, truth, goodness, to feel sustainably better. A child is born with eyes that are outside of the system, of the story. A child knows who scares them, who does this behind the cameras of the TV. A child's seeing the teacher with the other teacher around the back of the building. Do what your teacher says, but my teacher is doing this. Don't talk bad. Do what your priest says, but my priest is doing. Don't talk. Don't ruin the narrative with anomalous data. Why? Because it creates a crisis. If my model is flawed, I have to come up with a new model. Well, every cult in history has taught its model of reality. But how many cults in history have taught their members how to critically analyze their own cult, their own dogmas, how to focus on the anomalous data that doesn't fit inside the cult model, and how to iterate their culture to be more sophisticated, more intelligent than it was before, on the supposition that the cult is always wrong, that the majority has never been correct in the history of humanity, and that a small percentage of radical innovators have led the world from one narrative to another, from one model of reality to another, and given their cult life in the process. How many cults teach this at home and in school? It's hard enough to get children to fit into the box when they're told that the box is the only way, is for their benefit. When you tell kids that the box is killing them, is killing the cult, is absolutely wrong. But we're too dumb to figure out a bigger box, a better box. And maybe they are too. And so we're going to scrunch into this box because I don't know how to invent a better box. And even if I do, I don't know how to convince the other people. And we need to stick together because of the network effect. Because if one person comes up with a better USB port, it's a problem unless everyone switches over, right? So we have to follow the law of mass so that we can stay together, right? If the dominant computer maker comes up with a USB port shift, everyone will follow and will still stay together. But if you, as someone nobody's ever heard of, as a low-ranking member of your cult, if you come up with a better USB port, you will be the only one with that port. And my job as your parent is to see that you can get a job. And it may be that there's a better hiring process that you've invented, but your boss doesn't know about it and isn't going to use that hiring process, and you're going to rank low based on the existing hiring process. It could be that the questions you're being asked in the interview are absurd, relevant to the position, right? But your boss doesn't know that they are absurd. And if you can't get a job because nobody knows that they're absurd, it doesn't matter that your questions that you've got good answers to are better. Right? The network has to stick together, and that means following the lead of people with rank, people with mass, with money, with power, with whatever gives status in the cult. Right? This person has 1,000 shells around their neck. You've only got one shell. Right? We've all bought into the story that shells determine rank. Well, you've got 0.1% rank of this person. Look at all their seashells. Now, you're telling us that there's another way to evaluate importance? That seashells are not all they're cracked up to be? But who are you to say, right? That's for the person with 1,000 seashells to say. But why would they say, right? Why would they say, see all these seashells all around my neck? 1,000 of them, they just weigh me down. I've got neck pain. Any fool would know that. I'm a fool, right? What are you doing? Giving me seashell. I don't want more seashells. Duh. What are they used for? They're just, cut into my neck, right? At least polish them. So what are they going to say? I'm an unimportant person. I just happen to have the most seashells. This is a nutcase culture, and you're too dumb to know that it's a nutcase culture because you bought into it. Right? What are they going to do? No, they worked hard for all those seashells, right? They bought into it. And they're going to perpetuate the status quo. Let me just say, as the person who has accumulated the most seashells, polite applause, right? Whatever they want to say, right? That's the stepladder to rank. Whoever's got the most money, they don't know what to do with. Whoever drives the most expensive car that can't go any faster than any other car in a traffic jam, right? Whoever spent $300,000 on their university rather than learning for free on YouTube, right? They're the ones, right? So, that's the tension between the status quo and reality. The child is connected to life and is moving, wants to move towards well-being in a new system. But the child is not part of a network. And so life delivers a wound by the network to cut the child down to size. The child does have better ideas in many cases, as does the adolescent, right? But they don't have the network effect. So the cult delivers a blow, right? Cut down to size. Earn your way up the rank, and then you can change if you still want to, right? So, of course, the problem, once you've gone through all the gateways of torment to gain rank in a dysfunctional cult, why on earth, after all that suffering, would you turn around and say, I'm a complete fool like everyone else. I never believed in these stupid things anyway, let's change. Well, you might just be thrown out as a radical and upset everyone else, right? But you're certainly not going to hold on to rank. Right? But there is a king, there is a queen, there is a leader, there is a sense, a direct sense of connection to all that is, to source, that everyone has before it's been butchered. Everyone internalizes the wound. I'm not good enough. I'm inadequate. I'm ashamed. I'm stupid. Right? And that allows us to buy the system, right? Because if we knew how beautiful, true, and good our core is, was, will be, has always been, if we knew that we were right in our instinct to follow beauty, truth, and good, that was the right thing. We couldn't have learned the crude system and benefit from the network effect. So we internalize the wound. We brush up against it in adolescent. We become a somewhat functional grown-up and perhaps eventually an adult, capable of loving, responding, etc. But the number one responsibility, the number one challenge, if life is to evolve, if life is to grow as much as we all want it to, is to go back to rediscover with rank, with status, to go back and to discover the truth of that boy, the truth of that little girl, the wisdom, the impulse towards beauty, truth, and goodness. And lift the wound, remove the chains, and lead the way to the future. Now, the problem with the divine king, the divine queen, it's been locked up in trauma, it's been locked up in depression, it's been locked up in shame. Yes, master. Yes, mother. No, mother. Yes, mother. Right? The seal of that shame is trauma, is rage, is fear of abandonment, is fear of death. The king, the queen was bound up in fear, fear of traumatic pain, fear of isolation, fear of abandonment, fear of the loneliness of being ostracized, of being punished. The gold is inside that prison. Because as you get near the status quo and begin to let that deity return, you will remember the violence. You will remember the sarcasm. You will remember the shame. And you will feel like a 1- and 2-year-old child. You will feel like a terrified little boy, like a helpless little girl who is hated by people capable of killing you. You will feel that way. And even though you are not 2 years old, even though you are not 3 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old, your body has the memories at those age. You will feel that old. And even though the people are no longer giants relative to your size, you will wait to be hit, and you will believe that that hit can end your identity. And so you will not come out of the cage. You will not come out of prison. You will watch other people come out and cheer for them privately. Good, 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 God, get out of the cave, get out of the cage. You will root for the underdogs that have the courage to try, but you will not step out of your cage. You will curl up and know that in your world, it's too dangerous. It's safer to die a child, an adolescent, a prisoner, than it is to risk the hate, the terror, the shame, the violence, the disappointment of your cult, of your family, your job. And yet nothing great happens if everyone stays in the cage. All transformation, all fire emerges from less than 1% of the population that knows something so important, they are willing to risk death. They are willing to step out of the circle, out of prison. And the prison, as a grown-up, in a child's psyche, in a child's shame and pain, the prison is the fear of death. Social death, shame and humiliation. Financial death, ruin and bankruptcy. Physical death, disease, sickness, homelessness. Physical death, violence, rage, hate. These are the deaths that keep us in our fear of them, in our cage, in our prison. No one is stopping us from stepping out of the cell. The door is open if we can confront those fears. Galileo risks excommunication, beheading, ridicule, shame, scorn from his wife. You fool, why did you have to upset the Catholic Church? Couldn't you just go along like everyone else? Right? Why is Daddy being summoned by the representative of God? Well, he had to speak up about his theories. There isn't going to be much business coming in here. Might as well get ready to starve, right? Dad had to have his theories, and he had to talk about it. Why couldn't he just write them in his diary? The earth goes around the sun, right? Does everyone, what's the point, right? Less than 1% of people step out of prison, are willing to be humble, are willing to see a bigger picture than the dogma they've been fed. are willing to contemplate a narrative that includes anomalous data that is taboo in the cult. Now, why does a cult put taboos on large amounts of anomalous data? It's very simple, right? Anomalous data breaks the mold of the cult. And the purpose of a cult is to create cohesion, not necessarily sanity, not necessarily intelligence, not necessarily genius. It is to create a common protocol that allows the network to connect with itself. A cult is self-referential. We speak this language because we speak this language because we speak this language. And because we speak this language, and we all speak this language, we can communicate. We can interact. There's a port. When I say the word, it lands and connects. Because if we all speak a different language, when I say the word, nobody knows what it means except you. So there's no connection, right? So the cult's job is cohesive protocol. And cohesive protocol, in a simplistic paradigm, with a crude model of reality, is the enemy of light, of genius, of truth, of who we are. A dogma, a cult, that's the way it is, a self-referential meme that has no room for data, is the enemy of truth, of beauty, of goodness, while facilitating the flow, the synergies, the cooperation that give us the space to question the cult, right? It's very difficult to iterate new stories, new models of reality alone, right? And the Large Hadron Collider cannot be constructed by one man in a story. The Large Hadron Collider can't happen without money. It can't happen without a shared story, even if the story is wrong. You need tens of thousands of people to believe a lie and to participate in an imperfect system in order to construct anything, let alone something so big as the Large Hadron Collider. And the job of the top of that system is to maintain that lie and defend it against anomalous data that might lead to the project not being funded, right? Scientists, detached, noble people pursuing the truth at all costs, only interested in the facts, is a lie. But that lie has allowed billions and billions of dollars to flow in and allow useful research. Scientists are fools, highly political, backstabbing, cheating on one another, willingly throwing away billions of dollars of public money just to be right, sabotaging their peers' research so that they get the Nobel Prize. Scientists would rather publish more papers that have nothing to do with anything than help a single old woman cross the street, right? That's not a story that leads to billions and billions of public tax money going in to fund this, right? So the gatekeepers of the story, of the model of reality, are constructing a model of reality by rejecting large amounts of data that undermine the narrative, the model, that point out that the model is a joke, which every model is, right? There are just better jokes than others, right? There are jokes that are more fun. There are models that work better, right? There are models that are smoother rides. Now, this tension between the Christ child and the crucifixion. What is the crucifixion? It is the cutting down, it is the nailing to the cross of every creative impulse, of every new way of doing things, of every child's passion to go and play the violin rather than listen to their doctored history class. The crucifixion is the cult, is the wound. By nailing everyone to the cross, you kill a large portion of the psyche, the probability field of the cult that you're nailing to the cross. You crush a great deal of the spirit, the initiative, the truth, the beauty, the inspiration. But some of it gets through, right? You didn't kill it all off. You tried to shame little Johnny into not learning to dance because that's not what boys do. You banned him from going to dance school. You wouldn't fund this. You humiliated him at every dinner table, just like you humiliated 98% of everyone else in the neighborhood. But little Johnny became a dancer. He made it through. The other ones were cowed out, right? A little bit of the light got through the brainwashing, through the system. It wasn't all killed off, right? Often with a little bit of trickster, right? Now tell the truth. Have you been dancing? No, I haven't been dancing. Good, good. Okay. We'll ease up a little bit on grounding you, right? You can have some pocket money. What are you going to spend your pocket money? Oh, I'm going to buy a Tonka truck and play soccer. That's my boy. Okay. Right? A little bit of trickster allows evolution, allows life, light, beauty, truth to come through. They didn't kill it all off. They tried to. Machine guns at the ready, right? Little bit of femininity there, let's shoot it. A little bit of kindness there, we need to treat ruthless capitalism, right? You're a banker, you're not a human being. Now get back to work. I don't want to hear any more about giving loans to Phyllis, whose husband is in an accident. That's a bad credit risk. Get back to work, you're a banker. Banker, spell it, B-A-N. No kindness, banking, right? Anyone who needs money, don't give them any money. Somebody doesn't need money, give them money, right? Try to get customers who have lots of money and try to give them a loan, right? So these are the lines, right? And of course, we can't have banks going insolvent by being nice to people, right? What would happen, right? We've got to protect the banking system. It's the fundamental, right? These are the narratives, right? We don't look at another narrative. Well, how much does it cost the city to have homeless people per person? What's the cost in tax revenue and this and that? Well, that's not our problem, right? We're an individual, says the cult. As we reach a point where we have survived and are somewhat secure in our survival, where we have some sense of self-esteem and some sense of self-love, we stand inside our prisons, believing that everything inside, everything that was shamed, is bad, unlovable, hateful, ruining our parents and everyone's life, does not deserve any love and attention, does not deserve any visitation rights. Every time we have a little bit of an impulse, we push it down until sometimes we might buckle under the weight of all that money used to keep all those prisoners from speaking. Or maybe we feel safe enough to go down into the dungeon and realize that that part of me wasn't really that crazy. It's my mother that's crazy. It's my government that's crazy. You have a point. I'm not going to let you out because I don't know what will happen. And the last time you were out, I almost got killed because of you. But I am going to go down in the prison and listen to what you have to say. It's called journaling. It's called shadow work. It's called psychedelic journeys. Heaven forbid, right? Why is the number one path to healing and integration being fought by every major cult, by every major government in the world? It's not hard, right? Truth buckles the status quo. Truth destroys the narrative, crumbles the system. And the job of the system is to remain cohesive enough to create the network effect, to maintain flow. It may be garbage, it may be lies, but at least it's flowing, right? Plug in your TV, may be nonsense, but the TV and the transmitter are attuned. So that's what needs to happen for a network. So what's in the prison is your God, is your goddess. What was shamed, what was suppressed, what was banished, what was, this will be our little secret. That's the anomalous data that the system, that the story, that the model doesn't have room for. That's what threatens the dogma, the taboos, the status quo of the cult. It is also what leads to change, what leads to evolution, what leads to healing, the primary path of growth and of life. And it is where the majority of your energy and vitality resides. And you have to face death, social death, financial death, physical death, mental death. You have to face death because you're now part of the cult. So a lot of you invested in that system. As this part emerges, you are the enemy of the cult and you are its salvation. Christ represents the salvation of the species, of the self, of the cult, the evolution from the reptilian brain to the empathic brain. A system that has 1,000% higher efficiency. As you go from a diesel engine to an electric engine, there are profound benefits to the species. As you go from a reptilian cult to an empathic cult, the changes and the benefits are profound. But you don't get to upset a model of reality, a paradigm, an operating system, without threatening the status quo, without facing death, without chaos. And Christ was crucified not because he was wrong, but because he was right. Because she was right. She was crucified because her truth was too bright to ignore. Because the first reaction to all change, to all threats, to a system, a narrative, a status quo, is to discount and ignore and discredit. But if something is too beautiful, too true, too good, you have to kill it, or it will disrupt the norm. And that is why she was crucified. Today in your little girl, today in your son, that is why it's so upsetting. When something real is there, something beautiful, that if it had a home, could transform our relationship with our planet, our relationship to one another. It brings life, it brings change, it brings transformation, it brings transcendence. And it requires everyone to face the fear of death or kill the messenger of life, of evolution, of God, goddess, of the future. The crucifixion happens in each one of our lives, in each one of our children's lives, as the cult cuts them down to the size of a cog in the wheel and removes the divine crown that says, I am connected to life. My impulses are attuned to beauty, truth, and goodness, and they veer away from the cult. I can't put it into words, but I feel enthused, filled with God, filled with goddess. I feel enthused. For a very few people, less than 1%, in the older years, we can find the God impulse that is in our biology, that is in our creativity, in our imagination. And we can correct the course of a lopsided cult. Right? It's hard. You have to struggle. You hold a beam, a steel beam at a 45-degree angle. It's hard. You can get that balanced, more vertical, right? There's grace. There's centeredness. This is the tension between the cult and the child, between the cult and the divine, between the ego, the fractal representation of the cult, and the self that wants to take us home, to restore our relay, our relationship, the flow of energy from the center inside of us to the center of all that is, to the point of grace, to God, goddess, all that transcends the memes, the norms of our cult, and leads the way towards grace, towards the center,